the Reimagining Media program, which you, Vardan, were a participant in, where we're essentially over 6 weeks taking students through different types of journalistic outputs like podcasting, video editing. 2019 was when the CA NRC protests were taking place across the country, right? I remember when I was sharing this in my classroom, I was then teaching a classroom full of Muslim students. I had 29 Muslim students. I expected students to get angry. I expected students to have lots of questions. I did not have the answers myself. My students surprised me. The dominant emotion in the classroom was not anger, it was fear.
Hi guys, so welcome back to The Average Vlogs. And in our podcast, Common Man with Special Views, we have someone special today because she helped me to understand that forwarding WhatsApp messages again and again, it's not ethical because you never know, is it real or fake? We have Sukriti Pant, who is the director of Via News Didi Programme.
Hi, Vardan, and hello, Vardan's listeners. Thank you so much for having me on board your podcast, and I hope we have a fun chat today.
Yes, we're going to have definitely a fun chat and as well a little bit informative. So I know
Looking forward to both.
Many of my listeners, they are well interested in media literacy programs because even they feel that even at this stage, even in grade 12, they're still not confident with the media world. So I would just like to ask you, what is this Via News DD program?
Okay, so Via News Didi, as an organization, we started it in 2020. Both the founder and I, Asmita and I, we're both educators, so we both worked with students in classrooms. And during the COVID-19 pandemic is when we saw that no matter how much subject knowledge we give our kids, we're really not equipping them to differentiate between what's real and what's not. We're not getting them to critically think and question where they're getting their information from, is it reliable, or even how they should go ahead and verify it if they're feeling like it's possibly off. And so that's when we decided to start Via News Didi. We started out as a newsletter for students and slowly built up our programs until we now run the Reimagining Media program, which you, Vardan, were a participant in, where we're essentially over 6 weeks taking students through different types of journalistic outputs like podcasting, video editing, writing opinions, blogs, feature articles, and alongside all of that, getting you to critically think and question where you're getting your information from.
So you were part of the founder, you were part of the creator team when this news studio was established.
Yeah, I'm a founding team member, and I've been running Via News Didi since October 2020.
So may I ask, what were you doing before Via News Studio program? Or were you in media only or in
Yeah. So I was not in media. Like I said, I'm an educator. So I started out with an undergraduate degree in theater, English, and psychology. After that, I did a fellowship with Teach for India, which is an organization that places graduate students in government school or low-income classrooms. And we teach students for 2 years. So I taught as a teacher for 2 years and went on to did my master's in education. And that's when I moved into Via News Didi. So no journalism background whatsoever, but a very healthy interest in media, and that's what brought me here.
So I would like to ask now, you have talked about the program. I would like to know, like, there any interesting testimonials which you have from your program, or some interesting funny stories of the students and all?
Yeah. So lots of testimonials, lots of funny stories. I think the one that we usually, which is a general testimonial that all of our students give, is usually one that this is something that school isn't teaching them, which we're always very proud to hear about. That I don't think this is something that you get to learn in your classes, so it's always fun to learn. We also try to bring journalists to our programs and our master classes, so students get an opportunity to talk to these people that actually create the news for them, right? So there's also a lot of fun around asking them questions like, how much do you earn? Is journalism a viable field for me? Do you think it's possible for me to become a journalist? My parents are really apprehensive. What do you think I should tell them if I want to become a journalist? And along with that, I think also some very, very interesting testimonials on the kinds of outputs students create. So our push during our program is to really get students to look at everything that's happening around them,
Yeah.
and see that everything that's happening around them has a story in it, right? So when I say that I want to read the work of a student journalist, I want them to write articles on the MUN that's happening at school.
Oh.
A teacher that's retiring after 40 years of service in
So
the
very
same school.
grounded approach you guys
Um,
take in your masterclass.
yeah, yeah. We essentially want kids to look at what's happening around them as the news, because it is, right?
Yeah.
Students are a really underserved segment of the news system. The news is created for adults. Nobody's creating news for kids. When
Yeah.
they're creating news for kids, their most common approach is, okay, we'll simplify the news and now it's ready for students' consumption. But we're looking at it from the perspective of kids, right? Are you interested in reading about tax sanctions that the US is imposing on another country, or are you possibly interested in reading about who won the inter-school competition that your school hosted last week?
More like
And
this.
that's essentially what we're trying to get kids to write as well, right? So we've noticed that slowly and steadily students are beginning to write those stories. So you are writing about projects that are being run at school. You are writing about noted friends and achievers that you know of. You are creating podcasts on marathon athletes that really help you understand how running is a meditative practice, or talking to students in your school to see how the school and community library works and how it's helping kids. So yeah, if I were to talk of testimonials, I think everything that students create when they engage with us is a much bigger testimonial to us than anything that kids can tell us about what they learned in a masterclass.
And I don't know why am I asking this thing. I am the biggest testimony of News Didi program because you can see I have started my own podcast by learning skills from you guys, and finally having you. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, for me, it's come full circle, right? I had the opportunity to work with you in the program, and when you messaged me and said, I've started my own podcast, I was jumping up and down because I was like, oh my God, yes, yes, this is exactly what we wanted kids to do. So yeah, you are the biggest testimonial of the program for us, Vardhan.
And so now I would like to know, like, to a personal level, because this podcast is more focused on interviewing the common man's journey than the more about organization. So, how has this program affected you or changed you? And has it been one of your goals to start this program, or what? Like, just a little bit your personal journey about this.
Yeah, yeah. So I think for me, my motivation and my intention to start this program came very simply from my own experiences as a student. I was one of those shy kids that would sit at the back of the class. I didn't have a lot of friends, so books were my best friends. I used to like to write a lot, but I would never show my writing to anybody because I was very underconfident and I did not know what people would say about my writing, right? And all through school, I wanted a program where I could write and where people could give me feedback and where I could learn. And so when we sat down at Via News Didi to think of programs that we wanted to run for kids, I kept thinking of 13, 14, 15-year-old Sukriti who did not have anybody to guide her but wanted a platform to write and create. And I said, that's my motivation to sort of build this, to think of other kids who might possibly be in the same boat as me, who are looking for a space to express and write without judgment, and really learn along the way. So yeah, that I would say was a really strong motivation for me to start this program.
And like, how has this program impacted you? Like, after each cohort which you take for your programs, like, does it change you in a way? Like, you're thinking about the current generation, the Gen Z, Gen Alpha.
Yeah, most definitely. Every cohort of the program that we run, I feel like I'm getting older, even though we run 4 cohorts in a year. So technically, I haven't aged at all. But every cohort, I feel like I've aged 5 years because new kids come
Oh,
in with ideas that I never possibly expected them to engage with. When I was the age of our cohort, I wasn't thinking of the news at all. I hated reading the newspaper, and I would be forced to read it. Sometimes I would possibly go to the crossword section and be done with it.
I
Right. But
remember
here are
in
kids.
school we used to have like those Hindu or the news Times of India. We used to have like some articles to read.
Yeah, yeah. And I would read that newspaper. I would just flip through it, and then I would show the teacher. I'd be like, "See, I read it cover to cover. Mera kaam ho gaya hai." Yeah, and here I see kids who are sitting in front of me critically talking of Israel and Palestine
Oh.
and the budget, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, like this is stuff that I would have never dreamt myself doing at this age. So definitely, I think every cohort that comes in teaches me a lot in terms of what kids know and what kids are engaging with. But at the same time, it's also a lot of validation for me that at the end of the day, they are coming in and still asking me the same questions. Like, I don't know what's real. I don't know what's fake. I need help figuring this out. I like podcasting, and your masterclass taught me how to do that. I like writing my opinions, and I think I've found a way to do that now. So it's validation, but at the same time, it's also a reality check.
So, like, just for general tip for our audience, what is the biggest way we can identify something real or fake?
Yeah. So I think whenever you consume any kind of information, you'll often notice yourself feeling emotions. So you'll either feel really happy, you'll feel really sad, you'll possibly feel distressed, confused. Sometimes there's even like, warning bells going on in your head, like, is this
Hmm.
really happening? And if you're feeling any of those kinds of emotions when you're consuming any kind of information, that is the right time to stop and reevaluate it, right? So by reevaluation, I mean, if you've read it on one news website, go and look for another news website. Have they written something different on the topic? Have they written something that's adding to or removing away from it? If this is the only news website or channel where you found this information, this is probably fake. This is probably something you need to read about more critically. I mean, an example that's currently in the news is just, model Poonam Pandey
Oh,
faking her
yeah.
own death, saying, yeah, she died of cervical cancer, right? And so many news houses and media houses just reported on the news. Everybody has articles on their
Without
website
finding a
saying
dead
she's
body
passed
or
away.
anything. Yeah.
Exactly. They didn't look for any evidence of her death, right? They didn't look for a hearse van. They didn't look for a death certificate. They didn't even talk to her manager. Not a single media house went and interviewed her manager. They just relied on that one tweet and that one Instagram story and published it as the news, right? And today we're all waking up to the reality that she hasn't, in fact, died. That this was just a nice little PR stunt, and she's raising awareness about cervical cancer. But what does it say about journalism in India
It's
if
a
that's all
reality
we're
check for
doing?
our media.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? If you read that and you felt shocked because you just saw a video of her the day before the story was posted, and how can somebody so healthy just die of cervical cancer the next day? If that's the kind of warning bells that are ringing in your head, then you need to look for more information on this. And I think that would be the first step to trying and identifying if anything is real or fake.
I remember like one of my mentors. She told me that imagine if you got a WhatsApp message about a bomb blast and you forwarded that message to 10 people. You were aware, making them informed, aware about it. But then you realize one person from those 10 people tell you that that's fake. But then you realize those 9 people would have sent that message to 90 more people. So you are the culprit of sending fake news. So it is always good to remember what are you sending, because it is better to give real information than quicker information.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The trickle effect of the kind of information we share is something that we don't understand. Like, just by virtue of having a public account, you're not sharing a story on Instagram to just the 90 followers you have, but anybody on the internet can access the information you're sharing. So the kind of damage you can create with just a single story or a single post is really, really huge when you think of the way the internet connects.
And now I would like to ask, what are your future plans? Are you going to continue work under Via News Didi or going to expand your career?
So I'm in it for the long haul. This is my baby, right? I've been growing it since 2020. I'm in year 4 of my work here now, and I really want this to be the go-to place for students to get their news. I want this to be the organization that comes into kids' minds when they think of journalism as a future career path. And I really want to continue working to keep pushing kids to think critically and of course use their voice to create better stuff. Like clearly our media is failing.
Hmm.
They're not doing a great job at all, right? And if kids can take it over from them and do a far better job, I'll feel like I'm successful. So yeah, I'm in it for the long haul. I really want to build this and take it to heights that we possibly haven't even imagined so
Uh,
far.
so, have you ever thought about having master classes for adults, if not students?
We
Because
we
students
have actually, in fact, yeah, a lot of adults have told us this, including parents, students in college. A lot of people do want to learn this. We've usually so far we've just been very focused in working with students because it's really fun and pleasant working with students because students bring a kind of freshness to your master classes that adults don't.
hmm,
There's a sense of wow, there's a sense of wonder in the way you all engage with
there's more
information that adults
compassion,
sort of have
there's clear
already
commitment
lost.
towards the program if you compare the students.
Yeah. But what we have started right now and what we are doing up until the second week of March is working with teachers. We have about 15 teachers that we're working with, and we're training teachers to write the news for their kids and take the news into classrooms. And for us, that's a pilot. We want to see how what an experience it is working with adults. We want to see how else we can impact students by working with different ranges of adults. So there are programs and ideas in the pipeline. We're slowly moving into working with adults as well, but I think our primary audience and our focus at the end of the day is always going to be kids.
Yeah, makes sense. So now I just a little bit personal question. Are you guys associated with Canva in any professional way, or is it just like you guys love Canva? That's how you use for your newsletters and everything?
So we really love Canva. It's a very easy to use tool. It's a very versatile software that you can use on a phone, on a tablet, on a laptop. It has a wide range of functionality, and so Canva is usually our go-to. However, we are trying to see if Canva would consider it worth their time to partner with us. So maybe
Uh,
if you hit me up 6 months later, I'll tell you, yes, we do work with Canva as well, and that's why Canva is our go-to. Right now, we're just big fans of the software.
yeah, same. So now I would like to ask like a little bit more on like a controversial, you can say political side. Do you think our media is on a trajectory of becoming an ideal media, or it's so far that it can never become an ideal media, like our current national media?
I think there's a lot that can be improved and can be made better. Just in what's happened over the last couple of days in terms of not being able to identify if information is real or fake. I think that's a big wake up call for Indian media that if something as simple as the death of a person can't be verified, then we're the fourth pillar of democracy. What does it really mean for us when we think of journalism or media as the fourth pillar of democracy? We're definitely not um, on I would say a fast track to the ideal sort of media that this country needs. I don't think we're there yet. I know that there are smaller news houses, independent journalists that are starting their own stuff. So if you follow Faye, if you follow Anubha Bhosle, they're really doing good work in trying to get more interest and more accurate information to the public in formats that work for them. But I would say we're still nowhere near the ideal. We're the largest country in the world, but our media doesn't really reflect that reality either. Um, so there's a lot of progress for us. That being said, I think there are people that are trying to make a change, and I'm just hopeful to see where we will go. I hope we don't go further back or further away from the ideal. But yeah, there is a lot of scope for growth. So there's lots of interesting stuff and developments that can happen to take us to ideal.
And I think the students which you are training and who really want to go into the media field can be the future face. And I
Yeah,
think
I
that's
mean,
the purpose.
I don't want to be, yeah, I don't want to be that arrogant and say ki, yeah, the kids that I have trained will one day definitely be killer journalists. I think that's up to you guys to figure out for yourselves as well. But I think even if a student of ours in the long run does become a journalist, I think that will be our biggest win. Yeah, but I don't think we're there yet. I think you all still have a little ways to go to become journalists,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
past 12th grade first. Yeah.
So, do you agree that our current media is like a little bit biased or like less open to other point of views, and it's very like strictly the very right side way?
I think there's a lot of bias, whether it's bias to the right or bias to the left. Bias is a very is unfortunately a big part of the media today, which is sad. I mean, unbiased information is something that you should be getting from the media that you're not.
Mhm.
And so I would say there is bias, but I would say that bias isn't just right or isn't just left. Anybody, any kind of article you read, if it has any kind of opinion that's possibly been shared, then there is a bias there. And which is why my focus is not on how media is failing, but rather how we as citizens can do better, right? If the information we're getting is flawed already, then how are we preparing ourselves to deal with it, right? If your kitchen tap is giving you dirty water, your first priority is not to go to the water board or the water authority and get them to give you clean water. It is, I need clean water. How can I make it clean myself? And we're at that stage where we are thinking about it from an individual lens, right? How are we as individuals dealing with all this biased information we're getting? And in the longer run, we get the water board to fix the pipes, right? We get the water board to fix the pipes, so we get clean water. But in the shorter run, I'm looking at boiling my water, purifying it, filtering it, adding iodine tablets so it's safe for my consumption. And I look at the media in the exact same way.
Makes sense. I love the metaphor which you used to compare media. Now I would like to ask like about the program. So I know many students. So like some students who can't afford the program, are there any scholarships also?
Yeah, yeah. We usually run about 50% of our cohort. That is about half our students are students that do this program on a scholarship, a partial or a full scholarship. We don't want money to be a barrier to students getting access to critically analyzing information. And so, yeah, if you're facing any kind of financial difficulty, send us an email, fill up an application, and we'll ensure that you have access to the program with or without financial barriers.
That's a definitely good step. And now I would like to ask, like, have has this ever been like the students who are writing the articles in the master classes or the entire 9 week program, have the topics gone too dark, too mature, like, and then you think that that's not appropriate for our age? Has that ever happened?
I I know this might be a controversial opinion, but I don't think any topic is too mature or too dark for students to deal with. As adults, we feel like we need to shelter kids from topics that may not be suitable for them to view. So that's either topics with violence in them, of abuse, of topics that are too complex for students to understand. But whenever I find myself thinking that, I just think back to the kind of access to information that students have independently, and that you all are consuming all of these topics with or without us putting any kinds of restrictions on your content, right? So while your textbook might be safe for you to view, your Instagram possibly is certainly not.
Yeah.
And so we've had topics like um or like students, like high school students at risk of suicide, or to look at mental illness in high schoolers and how that's possibly on a rise, or even for that matter sex education in classrooms. And from our end, we always feel very proud when we look at topics like this, because these are the kinds of things that kids are thinking about, but don't usually feel confident or safe enough to have a conversation on. So if we have students from our cohorts that are writing articles like this, then we've been able to create some sort of a space for them to feel safe enough to express and share.
It is good that they are
So yeah,
talking
no
about
topics
taboo
are out
topics.
of bounds. Yeah, yeah, no topics are out of bounds for us. But we always push our kids to make sure that their language is respectful, that they're making their topics well rounded, that there's a lot of different perspectives for kids to read. And I think they do a killer job of that. So write whatever you want, as long as what you write is respectful, accurate, and you're giving people food for thought.
Makes sense. So you are also an writer, I guess, who writes stories and articles. So I would like
Yeah,
to
yeah,
ask,
I am.
do you think that what type of information which we write in the article should be thought of well before, because this information might impact the audience, like something like that? Because especially this happens in pop culture where a director creates a movie which is very violent, but that's director's freedom of speech. But do you think he should be careful and open-minded about the audiences, or he should just listen to what he wants to create?
Yeah, yeah. So again, I would possibly, use a metaphor for this. If I
Yeah.
was one person all alone on an island writing an article, I would not care about what anybody else thinks and write whatever I want, because I know that my audience is me. Nobody else is reading this article but me, so it impacts nobody but me, so I write whatever I want. But I feel like whenever we're creating for an audience that is not just us, even if it is just one other person who's reading your article, you have a responsibility there. You have a responsibility to present them with information that's accurate. You have a responsibility to challenge them, to push their thinking, to help them broaden their horizons on a topic. Because whether you're authoring a chapter in a textbook, or you're running a podcast, or writing an article, there's a lot of information you're giving your viewers, and they're placing a lot of trust in you, which is why they're sitting down to listen to your content or read your information. And so if you're not being accurate in the information you share, or you're not giving thought to what you're writing, then I would say you're doing them a disservice. You really shouldn't take your audience to be the kinds of fools that would waste their time on your content, because they're not that. Like, everybody has so much content at their fingertips, at your disposal. It'll take you exactly 4 seconds to get bored with my article and move on.
Mm.
So, but at the same time, if I'm writing something that's controversial, if I'm writing something that's just outright wrong, then you're also sticking with that article, and possibly changing your perception, and that's on me as a writer. So I would say there's a big responsibility at play. And so what I write, I usually check, recheck, edit. And so what I write never gets published instantly. It
Oh.
usually takes about weeks or months to see the light of day, because I'm constantly checking and rechecking to ensure that nothing I say is wrong, because
Mm.
lots of responsibility on our shoulders.
And I also think that we should just not write exaggerated, fake stuff, or maybe like just speak to spreading false narratives, just to like earn, just to be capitalistic, just to earn that money, or we can say which our news channels do, just to gain that TRP.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you do that, I think, honestly, in my mind, you lose the tag of a creator. Because if
Oh.
you're a creator, you have to be responsible. So if you're not creating responsibly, then you're not a creator. You're just, one other person that's screaming their narrative from at the top of their lungs on their roof. Like, there's no difference in my mind.
Yeah, like movies like Animal and many movies such as like these violent movies, they are promoting misogyny. And I think it's the creator's responsibility to show that why what the character is doing is not something to be proud of or something to follow it. Because they must draw the lines that even if this is the hero, this is something which is bad. Because if the audience doesn't understand that, then I think it's harming our the future of our nation only.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm glad you brought Animal up, because I've been hearing so much about the movie. I haven't watched it myself.
Oh,
I've
oh.
heard and read enough about it to not bother. But yeah, that's exactly what I mean, right? It's your responsibility to show your audience that this is what I mean by having a well-rounded perspective, right? If you're showing your audience one side and one side alone, then you're not showing them the entire picture. So
I
for
love.
every character that's violent and misogynistic, you also show them a character that's kind and empathetic and respectful of the women in their lives. And that's when you show your audience both sides, then you let them decide which one they possibly want to emulate. But when you show them just one side, you're doing them a disservice. They're not getting to see the full picture.
Yeah. So do you think movies like these who talk about anti-heroes should be like published in the mainstream media because it's affecting the audiences. But however, people might say like it's director's choice, it's his movie, it's his money, whatever he makes, it's his choice. So what are your stats? Because I am right now very neutral. I don't know, it should be like director should be open to create anything, or director should be mindful about the audience and all. Because again, it's his vision
So
and narrative.
yeah, it's definitely his vision, right? And if you think that these movies should not make it to mainstream media, then what you're engaging in is censorship.
Oh,
And censorship is very, very dangerous to any democracy because it essentially means that for every movie that's misogynistic that I pull off the market, somebody else can pull a movie that's really great and teaches society a lot off the market because they don't agree with it. Which is dangerous because then everybody pulls down whatever they want based on their own arbitrary rules, and so censorship is really the downfall of a healthy democracy. Which is why even though movies come out that are misogynistic, that are violent, that have that glorify anti-heroes and are teaching all sorts of nonsense um
the
to
youth.
to to yeah to the youth, that I still I'm not going to stand up and say that movies like these should be banned, because
Oh,
anything that's banned will instantly get far more attention to it than if it's out in mainstream media. So banning is not the solution, right? But I would, like, as a teacher, and I think of all of these things as teaching moments. As a teacher, I would possibly want to see how I can start a critical discussion with my students on the movie, right? So the movie is one side of it. Can you think of an anti-hero to the anti-hero? What would that person look like? What would their actions look like? And at the end of the day, how does that impact society? Because you've seen the impact here. You create an anti-hero to the anti-hero, see the impact there, and then you choose. uh, yeah, but censorship, I would say definitely not. I would still not go to the extent of saying this shouldn't be a part of mainstream media, because that's a very, very dangerous slope that we're treading there. Because everybody has a right to say what should and should not be a part of it. I would probably push kids to always think of the other side, the other picture. What does the other side look like? And then make a decision. Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, my parents always used to say, "हमेशा जो even if you say something to someone, imagine what will they feel." So from that age, I understood the concept of thinking about the other side. It has really helped me. So जब भी like when I go to give exam, I'm always like, if the examiner is reading this, what will the examiner think? So I like write responses according to that.
Yeah, and it's a great perspective to use in as simple a place as exams and as complex a place as voting.
Yeah, think.
To always think of the other side, because we're human, right? Which means that we're not omnipresent. We don't have the ability to see everything at once. We are only getting to see a certain side of a certain story. And if we push ourselves to look for the other side, to look for the other side of the picture, or to look at another person's view of the topic, we're always giving ourselves the opportunity to just look wider, look bigger, and hopefully that will get us to a better outcome.
Yeah, I think this year is going to be a very big year for our media because we have our general elections happening. So, is there any special happening in the reimagining media courses related to general elections? Like, or are the students writing more about the general elections? Like something like that happening, going as per the season?
So we're actually trying to engage our alumni, so students of ours that have finished the program, especially those that are closer to voting age or are
Oh,
possibly going
yeah.
to vote in the general elections for the first time, to write, to express, to share, to ask these questions. Because as adults, we've had the privilege of voting a couple of times now, for at least in a couple of the general elections, if not more, assembly level, state level elections. But kids that are voting for the very first time might feel that it's a big responsibility on their shoulders, right? Governments fall and change because of the votes that they garner, and kids that are voting the very first time also don't have any kind of information on how to vote, except for this is a voting card, this is the booth. They'll put a little black mark on your finger and you have to go press a button. um, but what you're deciding, the kind of decision you're making and why you're choosing to press one button and not the other is not something kids are thinking about. So that's something we're definitely going to be engaging in a lot more to get our kids to think critically about this. At Via News Didi, we're also planning to start a series of campaigns or possibly posts that also help people look at voting and electoral literacy a lot more critically. So when you choose to vote for somebody, what are the things you look for? Do any of us even go to a manifesto that a candidate for a political party is officially supposed to file, where they promise
Mhm.
the population a certain number of things that they will do if they come into power? Do any of us know where these manifestos are published?
Do we know
Do
what a
any of us
manifesto
know?
is?
Exactly. It's supposed to be something that you learn through an SST textbook. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's been erased from the syllabus by now. But yeah, so to think of it from that perspective, right? Because we're a representative democracy, which means that we are electing people to ensure that they take care of our needs,
Yeah.
they take care of our ideas, the things we want. And so we are giving them that power, which means that we should also look at how we want to hold them accountable to that power. If I've given you the power to vote on my behalf, then you should be doing the things I've asked you to, or you've promised me you will do. And if you're not, then I should have the power to at least create awareness that you're not doing that. And if possible, to get you off power because you clearly breached a contract, you broke a promise. So yeah, so a lot of things around that also, and from our end, hopefully we'll get people to think a little bit more critically about voting, about the politicians that are going to be contesting this time around, and let's see if there's any kind of change that comes from that.
So generally go and vote now. You are not like those people who just say like हमारे एक vote से क्या फर्क पड़ेगा.
Yeah, when I I'm glad you mentioned that. When I turned 18 and got the right to vote the very first time, I was that kid.
Yeah.
I was that kid that used to think, what one vote doesn't make a difference. One vote has absolutely no power. I am one in a sea of 7 billion people that are voting for different people at different points in time. What difference does it make? Um, but and it's very cliche, but I remembered this story. I don't know if you all have gone through this story, but this dad who has a set of kids who are fighting over who gets his property when he dies. Um, and the dad is really worried because his neighbors and the people that live around him are people that have been eyeing his property for a really long time, so he really needs his kids to stay united and fight for the land as a set of people rather than as five disjoint kids, right? So he gives each of them a stick and asks them to break it, and they're able to break it pretty easily because it's just one stick, right? And then he takes the five sticks he gives them, ties them together with a thread and asks them to break that, and they're not able to, and he's essentially able to get the point across that, united you can do a lot. But I take a different moral from this, right? I think of these five kids that individually were all thinking the same thing, and even if 10,000 people are thinking exactly like me that my vote doesn't matter, that's enough to sway entire elections. 10,000 votes have the power to change an election. Even 1,000 does sometimes if it's a really close race. So when I was 18, I started out thinking my vote doesn't matter. And now that I am 25, soon to turn 26, I do go and diligently vote because it's my responsibility to vote, and at the same time, it's the power that I have in a democracy. And if I'm not choosing to exercise my power, then I have no right to tell somebody in power to do things better. I'm doing no better with the power I have. Yeah, so and a lot of us start out that way. A lot of us start out with the idea that my vote doesn't make a difference, my vote has absolutely no meaning. um, but yeah, I'm hoping that that changes and that a lot of us end up going to vote because it does make a difference.
Yeah, because I used to be like you only when you were 18 that मेरे एक vote से क्या फर्क पड़ेगा. But after hearing this story for the first time, even I think if 10,000 people like me who think the same and if they vote, it's gonna be change.
It's
But
really going to make a big
yeah,
difference.
but अभी तो मैं कर नहीं सकता. I'll do in the next general elections.
Yeah, yeah. Next, general elections, assembly elections, state
Oh
elections,
yeah.
ward elections. There are so many that happen. Even electing a ward councillor or somebody that is in charge of the little immediate area you're in. Most people have residential welfare associations that also have elections. There are lots of power choosing mechanisms that exist around us. So even just thinking of the general elections and stopping there is actually criminal. You
Yeah,
should
I
be
had
thinking
this
of so
voting
much
thing
more
in
that
my
you can
school
do.
as the student council voting. So that that's the first time when all of us students are exposed to voting. Well, that was an interesting discussion on voting, and I totally didn't expect that we were going to talk about voting in the podcast.
Same, same. When you said that you wanted to talk to me about, Via News DD and our work and just podcasting, I thought I'd expect some more general questions on podcasting, which I was a little worried about because I don't take podcasting masterclass at the
Oh.
program. So I'm very happy we've switched to voting. I have no problems whatsoever.
Because that's the purpose of this podcast. Because we want common people to share their views on the common issues which impact all of us. And I've never told this history, but I'm going to tell the history in this specific podcast about how did this podcast come to life. So I'll tell you what happened the day I had the podcast masterclass. I created a podcast, and I was like, man, I didn't have fun because I followed set of questions and all, and I was like, podcast should be something which is like more interactive based and all. So I was like, this is the podcast I created for the masterclass. It's fine, chalo ho gaya. But if I want to start my own podcast, I want people to have fun and literally like feel like they're talking just like in the living room, just talking to each other. So then my nani was like, why don't this specific YouTuber invite me for a podcast? Then I was to my nani, आप क्यों वेट कर रहे हो उसकी मैं आपको लाता हूँ ना अपनी पॉडकास्ट में एंड शी वाज लाइक मैं सेलिब्रिटी थोड़ी ना हूँ मैंने कहा हु सेड पॉडकास्ट नीड सेलिब्रिटीज वी नीड कॉमन पीपल to share their common views, and then that's how we got the name Common Man with Special Views. And you have become a celebrity because you're
I
such a
love
big
it.
director.
I love that history. No, please. I'm not a celebrity by any means. I'm very happy being a common person.
Yeah, so that's why it was very interesting to know about your like thoughts on elections. So now I would like to go forward on the News DD channel, the main website. It's in the About Us section. It talks about something related to Delhi protests which happened in 2019, like as the story. So what's that? Were you part of that?
Okay, so that's Asmita's story, but
Yeah.
I am privy to the story. I know what she means by that, and so I'll share. 2019 was when the CA NRC protests were taking place across the country, right? Because the government
Yeah.
had decided to bring out the Citizenship Amendment Act. And so Asmita and I were both engaged in classrooms at that point in time and having discussions with students. So she was teaching grades 6, 7, and 8. I was teaching grades 6 and 7, and we were both having these discussions. At that time, we didn't know each other, but we were both having these discussions with kids, right? Um, and on these topics, because it was a difficult topic for students to understand. There was also so little information on the topic that misinformation around it was really easy to spread, because when nobody has information is when fake news is also really easy to spread, because you have no way to verify whether it's real or not.
Yeah.
um, and so the About Us refers to that specifically. Uh, I remember when I was sharing this in my classroom, I was then teaching a classroom full of Muslim students. I
Oh.
had 29 Muslim students, one Hindu student, and one Christian student in my
Must be
class. So the
uncomfortable while
CA,
was it
you
uncomfortable?
would think that, right? You would think that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought that when I first walked in, and it was fate, I think, because at that time I was an SST teacher, and in their textbook we were learning about citizenship. That was the topic, the chapter I was teaching them. So for me, there was no way I could have ignored something like this in the news and not brought it into my classroom, because I'm teaching you citizenship. What more can it possibly happen, right? And so I was uncomfortable. When I walked into the class, I expected students to get angry. I expected students to have lots of questions. I did not have the answers myself. Um, my students surprised me. The dominant emotion in the classroom was not anger, it was fear. Uh, because these kids were afraid. These kids studied in a government school classroom. Um, some of them did have parents, and some of them had grandparents who had traveled to India from other countries at before after the cutoff that the government had given. So they were in danger of being deported and sent back if the government chose to move ahead with the act. They had no idea what kinds of documents they needed to prove their citizenship. They had no idea if the police would just knock on their door in the middle of the night and whisk them away to some concentration camp. They had no idea what's going to happen to them. And so it wasn't anger, it was just fear. Um, and again, as a teacher, I felt very inadequate. I had no idea how to deal with it. I had no idea how to tell these kids, don't be afraid.
So how did
Nothing's
you
going to
deal with
happen.
it?
Because so whenever in my class, our simple rule was whenever we feel any kind of emotion, we're going to probe further. We're going to figure out why we are feeling that emotion, and we're going to try and figure out a way to solve for this problem that's making us feel this emotion. So when we felt fear, we went back and thought of why are we feeling fear? We're feeling fear because we don't know how we can possibly stay safe. And why do we feel we don't know how we can possibly stay safe? Because we have no idea what kinds of documents we need. So I connected my laptop to the projector in my classroom and we did a Google search. What documents do I need to prove I am a citizen of
Oh,
this country? And they saw the documents listed, right? They saw Aadhaar card, they saw voter ID card, they saw property proof that shows that you're an owner. They saw that your date of birth certificates, your parents' date of birth certificates, your grandparents' date of birth certificates. Then we sat down. They all took a sheet of paper from their books. We sat down and made a checklist. What all documents do you already have, or do you think your family already has? And then once they ticked off the ones they had, then they knew, okay, this is what I don't have. And so once they figured out what they don't have, then we did another Google search. Where can I get this document from? And then they got a way to do it. They said, okay, this you have to go to this office, you have to submit this kind of application. This is the amount of money you need to pay. This is how much time it takes to get this document, right? So they walked out with a plan of action. They said, okay, we felt fear, but now I know what I need to do in order to prove that I'm a citizen of this country, which I am. And that's how we dealt with it. And maybe I didn't do, maybe it wasn't the right way to do it. Maybe I should have possibly, comforted them more, or maybe this could have gone a different way. But this was the only way that made sense to me. Because this is what I do when I'm faced with an action or a task that makes me feel
so
stressed,
quick plan of
anxious, or
action.
fearful. I need to make a list. Yeah, I need to make a list. I need to make a plan. Otherwise, I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's what I got them to do. So a couple of them did this, then a couple of them said, we've learned how to do this, so we can go and tell our parents. But what about, our neighbors who don't have kids in this
Oh.
classroom? How will they know? So they actually made charts. They made charts where they put down, these are the documents you need, and they went ahead and went door to door to make these checklists for other people as well. So what are the documents you need? Here are the documents you need. Here's the process. If you have more questions, you come to me and I'll help you solve it and I'll help you figure it out. And I saw a lot of community action that day, right? These are
Uh,
sixth grade kids. Nobody's expecting them to do great things in
11
life.
year
But
olds.
here was here was a plan of action. They got their entire community galvanized, and everybody was out there looking for these documents, and there was no fear. There were just plans.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I know we've gone a long way from the about us story, but I think that's how it
No, that's,
started, right? We were
yeah.
teachers that were trying to get our kids to cope, and this was one way to cope while we were directly engaged with kids. But a lot of it was also misinformation and disinformation and fake news that we wanted to help kids deal with. And even now we do the same thing. We still have plans. We still have asking you to figure out what kind of emotion you're feeling and to try and deal with it.
Yeah, we have a mood
Yeah,
checker in during the master classes. Use Zoom emojis to tell your mood.
yeah, and we still rely on those same techniques to look at the emotion you're feeling and to make a plan.
But I think this like when they were of the I was also in 2019 in grade 7, grade 6, I don't recall. But I remember when I was watching the news, it was all violence. That how like they were trying, I can't say anything bad to one specific community. I will just say news was spreading hate amongst the communities. And me being a student like a 11 or 12-year old, raised in a family who was like very emotional. So they were very on the right side of the story. And I was like, I mean, I was getting educated in a non-ethical way because I was, through propaganda, I was being forced to believe in some set of narratives. But now I am hearing the story of these kids who were being oppressed, but still they knew how to deal with it, and then informing other people. And I can just imagine when they must have told their parents and grandparents how relieved they would have felt. Like their students are not, their kids are not being feared. They know the plan of action, and like some sort of stress must have been relieved during that situation. So proud of you, Sukriti, for
Yeah.
helping them.
Thank you so much. Yeah. For me, that was what it was, right? This was an issue that I could express rage for, but it wasn't an issue that would affect me. I was not one of the communities that would possibly have been told to leave this country.
Yeah.
But as a teacher in that classroom, I felt I had a duty to the community that would unjustly be told to leave.
Mhm.
And that I had to do more than
Oh,
just published.
yeah.
Said, कुछ तो कर लिया है मैंने. Like I feel like I have done something here.
Totally makes sense. And then such a good thing which you guys did. And I think that was the origin of Via News Didi program. And so now, lastly, I would like to hear some funny stories. Like you have done your college from Christ University, I guess, your bachelor's.
Christ University, yeah,
Christ
in
University.
Bangalore. Yeah.
And then, so any fun college stories you would like to tell, or somehow they're related to media or something like, some stepping stones in your earlier field, which would land you here, something like that. Some anecdotes.
Um. Oh yeah. There is one. So when I was in grade 12, I was I was a straight A science student. I did physics, chemistry, math, and biology.
Oh,
In my grades 11th and 12th. But somewhere through the middle of 12th, when my parents sat me down to have the career conversation with me, they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to do nothing related to science." So at first they were very surprised. They said कि फिर science क्यों लिया है तूने
टॉर्चर किया
इतना
अपने आप को.
2 साल क्यों बर्बाद किए सीधा arts लेती वो तो सीधा
हाँ.
arts लेती. I was like I was a very confused kid. So I told them in as many words. I said I was confused. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And if I take science, then most options still stay open to me. But now I know that I don't want to do science. And they said, "What do you want to do?" And the first option that came to my head was journalism. At that time, I had told them I want to do journalism. And I remember my grandmother sat me down, sweet old lady. She sat me down and she said, journalism mat kar. लड़कियों को पता नहीं कहाँ कहाँ भेजते हैं बिल्कुल अनसेफ प्रोफेशन है तू इंग्लिश पढ़ ले and of course I was all of 17 years old. I was like, no, I will rebel against the powers. I will go and I will do journalism, right? So I applied to Christ. And this was the first intake, so I think this was around April. When I went down to Bangalore, I did my physical interview there. And the first question the interviewers asked me was, "You're a straight A science student. Why do you want to do journalism? Why have you applied for this course?" And I told them, I really love to write. I've always felt that writing always helps me express. It's a great stress buster for me, and I want to do something with my words that I don't think science can help me do. But they didn't believe me because I was rejected for that seat.
Oh.
Uh, yeah, my dreams and plans and hopes of doing journalism came to an end there. And I eventually joined Christ again as a TAP student. So I did theater, English, and psychology. But I tell a lot of people now when they ask me, "Did you do anything media related?" I said, "I was this close. Okay, I was this close to doing an undergraduate degree in journalism, but Christ said no to me. So I went ahead and did theater instead." Um, yeah, but I was always interested. So when I found my way back here, about 6 years after my undergraduation, when I found my way back here, I went back and told my family, I want to do this. And again, first there was a question mark on their face. They said, "You did theater, then you did the fellowship, the Teach for India fellowship, then you did education, now you want to do journalism." And then my mom remembered this. She said, "You remember when Nani sat you down and told you that you should do journalism?" And that's when I remembered it. I was like, "Oh my God, yes, 6 years ago I wanted to do journalism." I would say that's the funniest anecdote that sort of in a very, very, very roundabout way has brought me back to journalism.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, if you want to hear more funny anecdotes, I did a theater degree, which meant that I was at my college 7 days a week.
Oh.
Because 6 days a week I had college, and the seventh day we used to rehearse for the plays we were putting up. So I had no life for 3 years. I have other funny anecdotes like that, but I think the one that's directly linked to the work I'm currently doing is this one. And I was rejected for journalism, and here I am 6 years later doing journalism.
I can relate to the theater anecdote because I had theater in my ninth grade and 10th grade as my one of my core subjects in my IB board. And then we also used to do so many extra work, staybacks, because in theater it's just like you want that thing to be perfect. And I was doing theater of absurd. And then man, the work I put for that thing was so
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. It's you need it to turn out perfect. So it cannot happen in school hours. It will always require staybacks. It will always require you being at school at odd hours of the day. I've seen the sun rise and set on my
oh.
university, which is something that I had hoped I would never get the chance to say, but I have done it. Yeah, it's just what you do to ensure that you're putting out the best version of yourself and your work out there.
I'll also share this anecdote. So, how I landed up to the News Didi program. So, my theater teacher, she told me that there's this program which is very good for digital literacy. You can go there. And then I was like, man, I need to build my profile for college. I need to do stuff. And I was like, I like talking and I want to do some podcast in future. So I was like, let's do this course. And then I landed in the course. We have the podcast, you giving interview, full circle.
Full circle indeed.
Yeah.
We've had so many kids who give us the same story that you do. There's a teacher in school, a senior in school, a parent, a friend who's done the program, who's recommended it to you, and that's essentially how we get our diverse cohort every time. Somebody somewhere has heard of us and has recommended it to somebody, and they've made their way to the program.
So to come and end, when is the next cohort happening? If the audience wants to be part of it or wants to know more about the newsletter program, so can you just sum it up?
Yeah, so the next cohort will be happening in April. We're waiting for exams to get over ideally. So
Hmm.
Feb, March, you put your nose to the grindstone and you study and you get done with your exams. And April is the first cohort you can join. After that, we'll have another one in July. So you get a chance to do the one in July if you are not able to make it for the one in April. We've also got we will launch a contest shortly, which we're hoping is going to be a little bit of a stress buster while you're doing your exams. Something simple, maybe around photography, because we've been wanting to experiment with the idea of kids taking photographs for a while. Yeah, so all of these updates are available on our website www.vianewsdd.com. And if you are a little more tech savvy than me and would like to follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn, we're on those platforms as well, where we post a lot of regular updates. But yeah, April is the first cohort. So yeah, if any of you want to be the next Vardan, whose theater teacher told him to sign up, April is when we will see you.
So, thank you, Sukriti. It was amazing to have you on this special episode of my podcast. And I think this is one of my dearest and my favorite episodes so far. So let me give you a virtual fist bump because the ones who I invite you at my podcast studio, they physically give, but you can give virtually. And
Yeah. Okay.
thank
Yeah. Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I think it was an absolute pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be interviewed by your students. So thank you so much for giving me the privilege to be interviewed by you, and to talk to your viewers and listeners. I think always great to talk to more kids. Yeah, and if you want to reach out to me, I will share my details with you. You can drop it along with the podcast, and I'd be very happy to have more conversations with kids.
Yes.